All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We've got a lot to go through tonight, so we're very excited. Welcome to our July meeting. We just came off a really exciting meeting in June where we did an RNO 101 education experience and also a neighborhood art fest at Spangling Brewery. So we were very excited about all the folks that turned out for that. And we have an amazing topic tonight, which is community benefit agreements and neighborhood agreements in general. So we're really excited about that. I believe I am recording. Can we verify that? Did everybody get a notice that I'm recording?
Yeah, you are recording.
Just want to make sure I have dropped the ball on that before. So great, we are recording tonight. I don't believe that Judy or Amber are going to be able to join us tonight. So I think that I'm going to do a quick overview of the June 22nd event that we did, and then I'll throw it out to anybody else that was there. Lou, Lucas, if either of you, LaMone, if any of you want to respond, that'd be great. So we had this 101 event in June on the 22nd, and it was our first attempt at doing this. I thought it was an outstanding success. We had between 30 and 40 folks show up for the RNO 101 education experience. And I'll let some others talk about, the details of that some more. But we were really trying to get in kind of the nuts and bolts and provide some resources for folks that are having some issues and questions about, organizing and the neighborhood ordinance and what it takes to have an RNO and be successful. And then we also had a art fest and social gathering down the street at Spangling. Both these happened in 5 Points, about a block away from each other. We had a great art fest that Amber Kraska organized and Lucas as well at Spangling Brewery for a couple hours afterwards. We had some music and dancers and a bunch of artists that were selling goods. And I think it was a great experience for everybody to kind of have some social time together as well. So that was, kind of the quick overview. We raised about $4,000 from that through sponsorships from Councilman Cashman, Councilman Wattsman, Councilwoman Sawyer, and as well as Radian, who's working in the RNO equity space. So we were really excited about that as well. I'll just flip it out to anybody out that has any other comments about that.
Yeah, I have a comment or two. These are the kind of events that INC does really well in terms of sharing information and bringing in really good quality speakers from the city and in the community in general. So this is the first of many to come. The RNO 101 is a project that the DEI committee is taking on. We have a really good group of folks. We're working on revamping the RNO handbook so we can have it accessible online, as well as resource information for the RNOs and journal assistance. So this was like a jump start for us for the summer.
Thanks, LaMone. Anyone else? Great. And, I think we're hoping that we can repeat this in some form next year as well. And so we're definitely, wanting to look at some options. And we got, some great feedback. Judy Baxter, who helped put the 101 event together, did a survey afterwards, and we got some really good feedback from folks on what they thought worked well and what they wanted more of. So I think moving forward, we're really hoping to catalyze on that a little bit. So that's great. So moving on, Greg, do you want to do a quick treasury report? And I can stop sharing my screen if you need me to. Greg, are you there? If not,
yes.
Okay.
Why don't we go ahead and we can do it late at another time?
Sure, no problem. Okay. How about moving on to ZAP, zoning and planning? Lucas?
Yeah. We are working on the agenda for next month. So we want to get the mayor to talk about his new sales tax initiative, and then we'll try to get an affordable housing developer to talk about their work in Denver and what the affordable housing landscape looks like there. Yeah, and then we'll see if we can get Andrew Webb from CPD to talk as well.
Great, thanks. I don't know if I saw, is Joel on? Does anybody see Joel? Joel, are you on? All right, well, let's move on to DEI then. LaMone?
Yes, so as I mentioned earlier, the DEI committee is continuing their work on the RNO handbook update, and we're putting together a draft for resources and also an outline of the information we want to cover in the handbook that will be useful to the delegates. So we meet monthly, the task force meets monthly, and we'll have updates for you as they come along.
Great, thank you. And I think that I missed something here, which is our land and equity acknowledgement. And I moved through that too quickly. LaMone, would you mind reading that?
Okay,
Thanks, appreciate it.
land and equity acknowledgements. The land acknowledgement reads as follows. As residents of Colorado, we stand on the unceded ancestral lands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, Lakota, and Ute nations and peoples. These lands were also a site of trade, gathering, and healing for numerous other indigenous tribes. We recognize Native and Indigenous peoples as the original stewards of this land and our presence among their descendants who still dwell within it. We pay our respects to Indigenous and Native elders, past and present. The equity acknowledgement is this. We acknowledge that racial justice, equity, and climate justice are inextricably intertwined, and that poor, vulnerable, and primarily Black, Indigenous, and people of color disproportionately bear the burden due to the lingering effects of systemic discriminatory practices. We commit to doing our part to ensure that when taking any action to create a sustainable and regenerative future, we will respect, promote, and consider our respective obligations concerning all aspects of equity and strive to create systems in which everyone can thrive.
Great, thanks so much, LaMone.
You're welcome.
And I'm just going to take a minute of to recognize, I believe, former Councilwoman Elbra Wedgeworth. Are you on? I see your name on there, and I know you sent me a message, so maybe we can get to you later. I know you've wanted to stop by and say a couple things here. So I think we are going to move on. And Greg, have you been able to take a tally for quorum?
I am still counting it up.
Okay.
So
Trying to see here if maybe we can move and
Hi. This is Elbra. I'm here. Something happened. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I think you might want to talk about an initiative that you're working on. And I just wanted to let you know that we are going to do a meeting in September on initiatives. But if you wanted to, welcome, first of all. And if you wanted to say a couple words, that's fine. But we're going to also do a bigger, we're working on a forum on ballot initiatives for our September meeting.
Okay, I appreciate just a couple of minutes. Hi, everyone. I'm Elbra Wedgeworth, and I'm representing Tobacco Free Kids. We are proposing an ordinance to move forward to Denver City Council to eliminate the sale of flavored tobacco products in Denver. And so I'll come back in September and make a more full presentation because I think that's appropriate. I want to interrupt your meeting, but I'm also helping Healthy Denver with Denver Health. So to help with that presentation also, if you want Denver Health representatives to come and make a presentation on that ballot initiative for that sales tax.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming. We'll reach out and make sure that we touch base about, kind of the format for the meeting in September, but I think it's gonna be really good. And we're going to try to work with a few folks to get that.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll just put my email in the chat. So thank you very much for your time.
Yeah. Thank you for stopping by. All right. So let's see here. Greg, how are we doing with the quorum?
So we have 10 RNOs registered. So we have 51 members. So we need 20%. So we're right on the borderline. Lou, will this qualify?
If we meet that quorum, that qualifies. We can also send out a quick, if we have to, we can talk to Maggie and send out a vote after the meeting as well.
We could do that over email, or we could also do it. At our next meeting in September, but
we can take the vote now and if we qualify on our delegate quorum. I can't see everybody that is a delegate at this point. So I think we just would ask everybody when they're voting on this wonderful topic to please only raise your hand, which is the one we're going to want you to raise is in the Zoom hand. So when we take the vote, if you could just do that. Let's see. I'm not even seeing mine right here right now, but raise your hand only if you are a delegate is the point. And then Greg can verify that number. And if we still need to send that out, we will.
does that work for you, Greg?
Yeah. Is Bill Tanner a delegate?
Yes.
So he would be the 11th RNO representative. So that would give us our quorum.
Okay. Perfect.
Hi, this is Bill Tanner. For some reason, I can't seem to get my correct Gmail account to operate for this Zoom meeting. So I'm stuck with a RNO Gmail account. So if I can
But we know you, Bill. We know you're a delegate.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, so that gives us our quorum, Keith.
Okay, well, that's great to hear. I'm excited that we can do this tonight then. So let me share my screen again here. Let me go to slideshow. All right. LaMone, are you on screen?
I am.
Oh, perfect. Okay, great. So, we're all very excited about this. Unfortunately, Joanna Rosa Sanz, our previous vice president, is no longer able to serve in that capacity. But we're very excited that LaMone, who's been a at-large board member for maybe I think 2 or 3 years now.
Yeah.
Great has agreed to fulfill the rest of the vice presidential term through the spring of 2025, and so I think we were all really excited when LaMone agreed to do this, and we're very excited for her kind of vision for outreaching to RNOs that are maybe not a part of INC, and from there I'll just kind of let LaMone maybe give a little bit of her, what she's kind of interested in, if that works. In your background, that'd be great. Too.
Well, thank you, Keith. So, yeah, my name's LaMone Noles. I've been a delegate for 2 years for the East Denver Residents Council. I'm also vice president of the Northeast Park Hill Coalition. I got active with the R&O world back in 2015 with CP Fan, and mainly because they showed a lot of activism in protecting the City Park Golf Course in the Ditch the Ditch campaign with Northeast Denver, Swansea, and GES community. I see RNOs as a very underutilized tool for neighborhoods to organize and protect their interests, as well as interact with city agencies to get stuff done for their communities. And who knows best about what a community needs than the residents, and then what better representation could they get other than the RNOs? So I'm really a strong supporter of the RNOs. I'm also a strong supporter of bringing in and creating new RNOs, which is what I would like to do for the next few months as vice president of the INC. And then our pet project with DEI is the RNO handbook. So I'm looking forward to doing the work and continuing the work. And as you can see in my biography, my family has had a presence in Denver for a long time. I graduated from George Washington High School, went on and got a bachelor's from Metro State College in business management. I did a 1-year law school with Purdue Global. And I also retired from the federal government, working with Social Security, Department of Defense, and rounding it out with the Veterans Administration. So my whole life has been geared towards public service, and I look forward to continuing that with the INC. Thank you.
Great, thanks, LaMone. And LaMone's probably kind of sick of me saying these, but I always, a couple of things about LaMone that I appreciate. One is that I always think she brings a really good perspective to conversations, and she thinks, kind of deliberately about what she contributes, and I really appreciate that. And the other thing is that I feel like everybody knows LaMone. Like every time I bring up LaMone's name, they're like, "Oh yeah, I know LaMone. I worked with LaMone, several years ago on this project or whatever." So I think we're really excited.
Right.
Both LaMone's like kind of outreach, and ability to connect, and for her contributions as well. So I don't know if there are any questions, or otherwise we can take a vote. The board voted unanimously on Monday to approve LaMone for this position, and I think we need an approval of the delegates as well.
Move to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Greg, great, thank you. All in favor, and I'm going to ask you either to raise your hand, put yourself on camera and raise your hand, or maybe just put your icon up. That might be the easiest thing here, though. I don't know if I can do it on my own.
Sure.
Very easily.
Just your delegates, probably.
There we go.
Yes, just delegates.
Just delegates. Yes, I'm sorry about that. Just delegates.
Where's the reaction tab?
It's in the upper right. Well, for me, it's on the upper right, but I'm screen sharing, so I don't know.
Oh, I found it.
For everybody else, yeah.
If you could stop screen sharing, Keith, so we could see everyone.
Oh, that's easy. Yeah, you're right. That's easier. And then, put yourself on gallery view. That might help too. So.
And Bill Tanner, if you can't do that, you'll have to come back verbally and just tell everybody you approve.
Yes, I approve. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Great, thank you. Great. So, did you record that, Greg? I have 8 or 7.
Yes, I counted 8 as well. Plus
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4.
If everybody could put their hands down, and then Oh, including myself. Sorry. And then if there's anybody that not approved. Okay, and then if there's any abstentions. All
I'll
right.
note that Iona Hartley didn't have her hand up, I don't think, but she did put in the chat that she does approve.
Oh, great. Thank you. Great. And yeah, I'm sorry too. It's hard for me to keep track of the chat while I'm kind of going back and forth. So if you all can like look at it and tell me what's in there, that'd be great. So I appreciate that. So great, that approves, and welcome, LaMone. We're very excited for
Thank you.
to be our new vice president. So thank you very much for
Thank
stepping
you.
into that role. We appreciate it. I also wanted to do a just a quick. He's not able to be here tonight, but Adam Meltzer is stepping off the board. Unfortunately, he's moving to back to Portland, where he's originally from, and owns a house there. And so he's moving with his wife back to Portland, and so he's not going to be able to be with us anymore on our board, and we're going to miss him for several reasons. One being he's our, kind of our technical whiz for in-person meetings and setting up the owls and stuff. But he's also been a really good, advocate for sustainability, and also, just a really good sounding board, I think, for folks for, a different perspective on the board as well. So we're going to miss that. Unfortunately, he can't be here tonight, and I think he's leaving in August. But we're going to try to convince him to come online for a meeting or two this fall. So we're hoping he's going to be able to be back in a delegate meeting in the fall. So we're really hoping for that. And with that, I'd like to welcome Ann Kingston, who will be joining the board in a few short weeks from City Park West. Ann, do you want to say hi? And maybe what you've been up to in City Park West, and what you're excited about for INC.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been living in City Park West for a couple of years now. I'm on the board of our RNO as well, helping support the social media efforts. I have a background in public policy and corporate communications, so helping to kind of foster the outreach and communications component for the RNO, and we've got our annual meeting coming up. I've been helping with the events of the INC as well, including the one we did in 5 Points. So that was a lot of fun, and helping to get some sponsorships for the coming annual awards celebration in the fall.
Yes, and thank you very much for that. We're very excited for all the things that Ann's going to bring to the board. So we're excited to have you come on board the board. So
thanks, me too.
Great. All right, great. So moving on, I'm going to try to share my screen real quick, but then I think we can throw it over to you, Lou. So our program topic for tonight is, kind of broadly community benefit agreements, and moving on from a really great presentation that Lou and Gertie both did last summer on good neighbor agreements, and kind of moving into the next step here, which is some larger agreements that are community benefit agreements, and giving some information about that. We're really excited. Lucas is also going to spearhead some conversation on that, and I believe Alex is here from the excise and licensing also to talk about the business hearing fund. So this is all great stuff. So Lou, do you want the screen now?
Yeah, I think I just hit screen sharing. So tell me if you can see what I have up here.
I see it.
Does everyone else see it? Ashley's nodding. So I'm going to assume that you all see this. And we're going to dive into this. Thank you guys for coming. I think that these type of agreements are really important for RNOs to understand. I see that Gertie Grant, my partner in crime, last August who worked with us to do a very robust program on good neighbor agreements and on development agreements slash community benefit agreements. What we're going to talk about, we're actually going to just take a step back. So it's sort of the prequel that we're doing now, because and I will show you how to find, it's right here. If you go to the INC website and go to the August 16, 2023 presentation, this is worth watching, because we are not going to go through the level of detail that we did go through in that last August meeting. What we're doing now is the prequel, is to kind of answer some of the questions, frankly, that came out of that meeting and back up a little bit. Gertie is also a retired attorney. And while she didn't quite live in this development real estate world that I did, she has had a tremendous amount of experience with good neighbor agreements and did a fabulous job presenting. So I will tell you that I'm going to refer back to this, because there are examples and there is a level of detail in that meeting that will help RNOs that want to really understand how these agreements will help you address certain matters. What I'm going to talk about is give you, again, the prequel. So what are these agreements, and what is the spectrum of agreements that our RNOs can engage in? So when we talk about this all in one bucket, we need to look at it again on this spectrum. So think of different kinds of agreements for different purposes. I think of the good neighbor agreement as the least intensive. These agreements can be very simple and address one specific concern with one specific use. I also identify these as dealing with matters that are not a permanent use. So think of licensing, because again, it's use. And if there's an application for a liquor license or a cabaret or a marijuana, we'll talk a little bit more about that. And we're thankful to have somebody here from excise and licensing. Those are appropriate for good neighbor agreements. For larger projects where you're dealing with real estate and rezonings, which some neighborhoods have used a good neighbor agreement, but more and more the complications of those rezonings, even for single properties, may require a more intensive review of what can be negotiated by an RNO in an agreement. And we have plenty of examples to use. I think a lot of RNOs use their good neighbor agreement that might have been fine for the new restaurant down the street that wants a liquor license, but doesn't really fit when they're talking about a new 12-story building on a piece of property in their neighborhood. So understanding that this is a spectrum, and that if we can give examples and we can continue to train RNOs how to use these tools through Inc., we will help neighborhoods address concerns they may have with these particular uses, and for the bigger projects, these rezonings. So the big difference, as I said, I use good neighbor agreements to talk about a non-permanent use on the property. It's a license that can be revoked. If the licensee violates the terms of the license, city can pull it. For larger projects that involve real estate, these type of agreements are intended to be attached to the property. So how do you do that? You record it. So that way, if they're attached to the property and they run with the land, is what the lawyers call it, then if the developer sells the property to another entity, those terms that you've negotiated and recorded against the property will stick. So then we have, and that can apply for whether it's the one building that's coming down and they're applying for a 5-story building, or again, a few lots where there's going to be a 12-story building. So whatever it is, if there's a rezoning effort to change the rezoning for a different use or building on the property, that sets you up for something that can be attached to the property, which means you have to deal with the owner, because only the owner of the property can record something against their property. And you can't just go record something against somebody else's property. It has to be consensual. So then we talk about on this continuum, on this spectrum, the very large projects. You probably have been watching now the ball arena process going forward. We also had in the past, LaMone mentioned it, the Park Hill Golf Course was a very large piece of land that had a number of interested RNOs and community groups working with the developer to negotiate a good neighbor, or excuse me, a community benefit agreement that again is on the other end of the spectrum from the small use good neighbor agreements. That agreement was discussed at length in the August 23 presentation, and that agreement addressed many, many issues. And so if you're working on a large one, we in Cherry Creek are working on a large one right now with the big Cherry Creek West property, which is 13-acre parcel. So these are things that if you've got those kinds of rezonings, there aren't that many large parcels that are being rezoned, but when they are, sometimes they take 3 or 4 RNOs who are involved in the area, who want to have a say, so you can get coalitions of RNOs to work on those. But those are the ones where you really want to make sure that you have a seat at the table. Why? Because they're so large that they can actually impact the character of your neighborhood. In a neighborhood like ours, where we don't have a lot of large parcels, and frankly, we don't have a lot of affordable housing, this is important to us. So we want to make sure we have a seat at the table and that we know we're going to have some affordable housing. Now, I will say, and this is important, and I've got it here for you, that city for large real estate rezoning, so this is over 5 acres, will go through what's called an LDR, large development review process. And that can last 2 or 3 years. It can also involve every single apartment in the city. And the city now is looking at these kinds of requirements, like rezoning to include affordable housing, or to include other benefits that are good for the city overall. And then we want to make sure when RNOs come in and they want a seat at the table, they understand that the city is going to have its own development agreement. The RNO isn't going to benefit from that, but that will be there. So knowing that those processes for these very large, at the large end of the spectrum, are already going to be undertaken by the city allows the RNOs to say, well, what is happening with the city? What will those requirements be? And they can get comfort with that, and they can also, what I call, wrap that in their own development and community benefit agreement by saying that the developer will honor and agree to follow and not amend the development agreement with the city without the RNO's consent. So one of the key points in all of the agreements across this spectrum is that the city is not going to be a party to any of the agreements with the RNO. The city, as I said, for LDR projects, those large development projects, will likely have its own development agreement with requirements of the developer, but they won't join in your good neighbor agreements, development and community benefit agreements. So this is why it's important for RNOs to have a seat at the table and to be able to educate themselves about these agreements, what benefits they can provide, and be active in making sure that if they don't have the resources, that they come to Inc., that they go to their city council person, and they help get the resources to benefit the neighborhood. So now let's go into the couple of these in a little more detail. So as I've talked about on the small end of the spectrum, we have GNAs. And they are regarding a use. And you have to look at what that use is. The R&O will get a notice from Excise and License of a proposed license application, whether it's cabaret, liquor, or marijuana facility. If it's going to go in your neighborhood, they have to have a license. If it's going to be a license, somebody who is the named notice party with your R&O is going to get a notice. Now, if they're gone for 2 months on a vacation, you want to make sure somebody is monitoring that who is also on your board, because you're going to get one shot at this. And if you go back to the August 23 presentation, you will see from Gertie's presentation that it's not always easy to find the information necessary to engage that applicant developer in a conversation about a good neighbor agreement. But if it's right in the middle of your neighborhood and it's a facility surrounded by residential apartments or houses or whatever, you're going to have concerns about noise and trash and lighting and the kinds of things that you would just have common sense about that use in that location. So I have said many times in the earlier presentation that when you look at the kinds of agreements that have been done, other R&Os can pull samples of those, which we have and are available on the website, linked to that prior presentation, that you can use like a checklist. We're going to go over a few of those things yet today, but you can go back to that. It will help you get a better handle on more detail than I'm going to go into today. Again, the city will not be a party to your GNA, but they may assist in facilitating and negotiating, because the city wants and encourages the applicants to work with the neighborhoods. And I think we'll hear a little bit about that from Alex here today. But what you really want is to be able to get the notice, engage your whether you call it a zoning committee or a development committee, whoever it is on your board or in your organization on committee, don't have to be on the board. They just have to be in your group, people who volunteer to take this up and look at it, and then find out what those common sense concerns would be and sit down with the applicant to see if they can reach compromise on the kinds of issues that would come up. So as I said, the GNAs for excise and license application are most prominent, I would say. So there are more GNAs at the smaller end of the spectrum than there are community benefit agreements on the large end of that spectrum. So why would anybody want to sit down with the R&O and talk about these concerns? Well, that's because they have to go to a needs hearing. And this will be run through the Denver's Department of Excise and License. And it has an opportunity then for the R&O to say, we don't want that use, or we're fine with that use, but we don't want noise to be on the outside patio after 10 o'clock. Reasonable kinds of restrictions that won't stifle the owner of the facility, but will protect neighborhood interests in the immediate vicinity. The public needs assessment hearing has very specific rules, regulations, policies, procedures, who can participate, how they must participate, when do they have to get the notice, for example, how they testify. Again, I'm going to send you back to the presentation by Gertie Grant that we did together last August, which is linked above in these materials. So I don't know how long it takes, but this recording and these materials will also be linked. And so again, your R&O will receive a notice by email to the person that is your notice party when you file your R&O annual report. We will also have how to RNO. That was the topic of the June meeting that was discussed earlier tonight. And hopefully you will be able to get that and the materials, and it will show you how to make sure you are compliant with the RNO requirements so that you will get these notices. If you don't have an RNO notice party and you're not compliant with those requirements, you may miss the opportunity to receive the notice, discuss the notice, and work through a good neighbor agreement on those kinds of licenses. So I wanted to talk about a couple of other common GNAs. There are temporary safe outdoor housing supportive sites. These are called temporary safe outdoor space sites. They are located often on the church or nonprofit properties on vacant land to provide temporary housing for unhoused residents. I've got an example of this, and if I have a little more time, I think I'm going to wait to show this, but I was going to pull up one at the very end and show you. I'm not quite so sure. I'm good at pulling up two different things at once, so I want to get through this outline first, and then I'll give you a little tour through a couple of those things, which again, that will be on the website for your use in the future. So a temporary safe outdoor space usually is in a residential area. And the city has worked very hard to come up with appropriate rules, regulations for these sites, but then also to encourage the registered neighborhood associations to understand them, to talk about them. So the one I'll show you shows that there are very, very strict requirements in that GNA that talk about who can stay there, the fact that they are prohibited from violence, weapons, illegal drugs, discriminatory or disruptive behavior. So those are important, and neighborhoods that need to understand that if one of those is going to be welcomed into their neighborhood, they also have a right to talk about what can or cannot be operated in their neighborhood through this GNA process. What you can't do is just say, we don't want those in our neighborhood. You're not going to get any support for just opposing those in a context of a good neighbor agreement. So that's really about bringing people together for cooperative process that results in benefits to everybody. So I talked about this briefly. The difference between the one end of the spectrum that relates to GNAs for licensing and these larger projects that relate to real property being rezoned is that the real property GNA or development agreement all the way up has the ability to be recorded. That's why I call them development agreements or development and community benefit agreements. It sort of distinguishes that. And for that, you need the actual owner of the property to be a party to that agreement, not just sometimes you'll have an owner selling the property. They authorize somebody to file the rezoning on their behalf. But they have what's called a contingency in their purchase contract. They're not going to buy the land unless they can get it rezoned for the development that what they want. What does that mean for RNOs? It means that you've got to make sure at the time that you've finished the agreement that you have the actual owner, the developer signing the agreement. It gets recorded against the property with the owner's consent, and that you actually show the recordation information on the front of that document. In the GNA context for use, some of those provisions are not recorded against the property. Instead, because it's a license, they're actually included on the face of the license itself. If you watch that August 2023 video, you will see that there are some things you can put into the agreement that they will be binding agreements between the RNO and the operator, but they won't be things that excise and license will actually put on the face of the license. But there are many things that they will. So look at those agreements, follow up with excise and license when you're working on one of these, and use those resources. So we're going to go on to the bigger real estate development community benefits agreements, sometimes just called development agreements. These are ways that we can facilitate growth, increase density, rezonings in our neighborhoods that will allow those developments to come out of the ground in a way that will work for the neighborhood. What does this mean? It means limiting certain uses or building rights that would otherwise be allowed in the zoning that they're seeking. So, for example, we have several agreements. If you look at the zoning code and you're familiar with it, you might have a CMX 5 and then it goes to a CMX 8. Well, what's missing between them? 6 and 7, right? So you can't build 6 stories unless you're going. I'm not including any use by rights for increasing for affordable housing, which has its own set of restrictions. I'm just talking about if somebody wants to build a building and they want to use a CMX 8, you might say, yeah, CMX 8's okay for all the other pieces of that zone district, but we don't want you to go over 7 stories or X feet. That you can do in a development agreement. We did one where I have this example where we wanted it limited to 4 in a CMX 5, and we were able to negotiate that with the developer. So again, agreements come in all sizes. You might have that one concern about height. You might have a small building that's going to be on that's on one small lot that's going to be up to 5 stories, and you just have one request. You don't want it to be used for example, medical office. Why? Because lots and lots of traffic comes with medical office. So you might have that one simple thing that you want. Otherwise, you don't really care. You're good with it. You might say, we don't want a rooftop restaurant that's going to have noise after X time, but you're going to get a shot at that rooftop when they come in and apply for a liquor license. That's when you're going to say, because most developers of the building are not going to be the operators of the restaurant. So know that you'll have another bite at that apple. So pick off the big stuff. See if you can keep your agreements fairly simple. In the August 2023 materials, I talked about at office development and Second and Adams, where the developers have been really terrific working with our neighborhood. They limited uses. They agreed to transportation solutions management. They agreed to a number of things where they even agreed to use design guidelines, which would not otherwise apply to their building, but that would be in the adjacent business district. And so it was a very cooperative, good relationship. And now they have a number of residents in the neighborhood who are watching shovels go in the ground, and they actually keep everybody updated. And it is so a very much a win-win. So then we get to the large development examples. These may never apply to you, but you know what you can use them for? You can use them to look at what kinds of things are issues that are addressed in these kinds of agreements. So I've said this in the August 23 presentation, the Park Hill agreement was a well-done agreement done by one of the really big developers and one of the best real estate boutique firms in Denver. And it's an example of a large development that you can use with a range of provisions that you can kind of use as a checklist. So again, I can't encourage you enough to go back to the more detailed, longer, some may say more boring presentation on these types of agreements in that August seminar that we did last year with the attachments. I'm going to pull up a couple real quickly here, but it is a way for RNOs to use the expertise that has been gained by other RNOs, and they put it out there. So we're putting it out here. As I said, we encourage you to get that information and plagiarize. Take it, copy it, use a checklist. That's great. Do what you can do for your neighborhood to benefit these cooperative arrangements with developers. We all know, and especially people who live downtown know this right now, if your community has any commercial and it dies, your neighborhood will die. So we know that really well in Cherry Creek because we've got so much commercial, and people live here because they can walk to those uses. So I try to encourage everybody, don't treat a developer or an applicant as a really bad person. All they care about is doing, I mean, they have their job to do and they have profits to make, and that's why they're there. But they want to work, at least most of them want to work cooperatively with the neighborhoods. And if they really don't, they're probably going to have a more difficult time getting approval. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing this and I'm going to spend 2 seconds pulling up another document to just show you. Let's see. Okay, this is that agreement that I told you about. Can everybody see that? It's the Safe Outdoor Space Good Neighbor Agreement. Again, it will be posted. This is one that was done on 1373 North Grant. The recitals, as you'll learn it when you go back and listen to that previous training seminar, the recitals tell the story. Who are the parties? Who's the community? What are they doing with the property? So the recitals tell the story and they say why it is that these parties are entering into this agreement. So there are resident screening and assurances to the neighborhood, who it's open to, the maximum length of stay, the maximum number of people, no more than 22 dwellings, no more than 30 people. They go through all of these issues about drugs, alcohol, all these things that they want to make sure that the person who's running this site will make a good choice in who gets to live there and care for the neighborhood. So let me stop sharing that one. Again, this will be on the site in a little bit later. And I think I had one more that I was going to show you. So I created a simple form. And I left a date in here, but you can decide, you can modify these things. I've tried to bracket the things you're going to need to use, but I've tried to create a form that you can pull down. And this would be for a restaurant that has both indoor space and adjacent outdoor patio spaces. Those are most of the concerns that residents have when a restaurant with an outdoor patio or a bar or something comes into their neighborhood. They might love to go over there and get a drink at happy hour and a quick dinner, but when it's 9:30 or 10 o'clock and they're putting their kids to bed, they want that sound off. That is one of the biggest things. And we will also be posting some way, I'll figure out a way to get it up there, the ordinances on sound, because those are a little different. But you want to make sure when those come in that they follow those noise ordinance requirements. So for the interior establishments, what we normally say is, it's fine if you shut off that patio and you close those open windows and you stay under the noise ordinance, what can be heard outside, and there are specifications for that in the ordinance, then you can go ahead and operate till 1 a.m. when you normally require to close down, or whatever it is now. So for the outdoor spaces, however, these are the kinds of provisions. You got to shut off all noise that can be heard by 10 o'clock or midnight on weekends. You can negotiate those things. So you've got to give the neighborhood organization, excuse me, a contact so that you have somebody to reach out to if there's a problem. And so these are the kinds of provisions that you can actually require to go on the license. And then I have included, and I talk a lot more about this on the other August 23 seminar, about what it means to protect your RNO. So we have provisions in here that says, look, we voted on this as a board. We're doing our best to live it within this, but there may be people in our neighborhood that still go and say, we don't want this use, and that complain about it at the hearing. They have a right to do that. This is just saying, you know, while we're supporting this, we're not, you can't hold us liable for anybody else who might complain about it. So again, a simple form, I'm putting it out there for you guys to use. And with that, I will stop sharing. I hope this has been helpful. I think it will really be helpful, mostly if you use it as the prequel to the more detailed seminar that I did with Gertie last August, and which is easily accepted. I watched the whole thing again. I went, wow, Gertie, we did a pretty good job. So use those resources, please. And with that, let's see, Alex Vidal, I would like you to come on screen if you can. And
And I'll
hopefully
just
you're
say,
allowed to
Lou,
share.
if you could throw any of the links that you had from your presentation in the chat. I think we've had a few people ask for some of this stuff. If you're able to do that at all, after the presentation
I'll
is
see
done,
if I can.
that'd be great.
But
Thanks.
again, all you have to do is go to the website, but I'm going to try to put that I'll try to put that in the chat right now.
Great, thanks. And I'll look for
Thanks,
the link on
everybody.
the website.
Just wanted to start off by testing my microphone. I've been having some audio issues with my laptop, and so Lou, are you able to hear me clearly?
I am. Thank you, Alex.
Fantastic. I will come on camera so that you all can put a face to a name. I'm Alex Vidal, a policy analyst for excise and licenses. I really appreciate the opportunity to come speak to you today about the business license hearing fund. INC is such a great organization. It's really nice to see all of the help that you're providing for residents to be able to engage with different processes and you know, maximize those benefits that you were talking about. Also, when I go to do my presentation, I'm going to come off camera. I only have one screen today. My other screen's broken. And so I won't be able to see hands up or questions in the chat. Keith or Lou, if you're able to let me know if there's a question in the chat or somebody's got their hands up, happy to answer questions as we go. Or if you want to wait until the end, sometimes the answer to your question is it's going to be on the next slide. But you know, either way, I'm always happy to answer questions as we go. So with that, let me jump into the presentation. There we go. All right. So again, this is about the Business License Hearing Fund. This is a program that was started last year. It's through the Department of Excise and Licenses. We issue licenses for all kinds of businesses and occupations here in the city. Probably most familiar with licenses for liquor, marijuana, cabarets, which is a noise essentially license, and things like food, peddlers, you know, pedicabs, things like that. So the purpose of this particular program is to make our hearings more accessible. So the public hearing, as Lou mentioned earlier, is a required step for several of our license types, mainly liquor, marijuana, and cabaret. Those are the top ones. And the purpose is it's called the needs and desires hearing. So it's to a chance for the department to see whether the residents in the area, you know, need it, whether there's a need for it, or if there's an oversaturation of certain types of businesses, and there's a desire for it, right? We don't want businesses going into communities when the residents truly don't want the business there, or it doesn't fit the needs of the neighborhood. But the process can be a little intimidating. It's quasi-judicial kind of nature. You know, there's a hearing officer generally that runs the hearing. And so sometimes participants, most of the time, participants obtain legal representation. Most of the applicants, you know, there's a lot of complexity, and so they want to make sure that their interests are well represented at the hearing. We do provide a guidebook. It's been revamped completely within the last year, so it's very user friendly. We use simple language, try and make it, you know, as easy to understand as possible. But nonetheless, you know, sometimes it's useful to have legal counsel. And so the purpose of the fund is to make the process a little bit more accessible by providing some mini grants to cover some of those legal expenses. So the goal of the program for this year is to award the $150,000 that has been set aside for this program. That was the same amount that was set aside last year. We want to get that distributed to qualifying recipients by the end of the year. Round one closed just at the end of last month. Applications were open June 1st to June 30th. Right now, we're estimating about 66,000 of that was awarded that first round. We're still processing some of those applications, so it might go up, might go down a little bit, but as you can see, there's still plenty of funds to be awarded in round two, if you do a little quick math. And so that round of applications will open in September. There'll be a communications push, and I'm again really glad to be invited to INCs to make everyone aware of this resource. So as I mentioned earlier, what types of hearings are eligible for this? This is for needs and desires hearings, required for marijuana, liquor, and cabaret licenses, also for all new applications for these types of licenses, but also for transfers of location and modifications of premises. And so if it's going to affect, be a new use or affect a new neighborhood, or the use is sort of going to change a little bit because the premises is being modified, those are all situations that require this type of public hearing. It also includes when you're adding a liquor or cabaret license to an existing business. So if you're a restaurant, you want to add a liquor license, or you're a bar and you want to add a cabaret license, those would also require a hearing.
Hi, Alex.
Yes.
I'm not sure if you're scrolling through. Okay. Yeah. We aren't
No,
seeing any kind of a change in your screen. So.
Oh, how about now?
we just saw a slide change. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So we were
Okay.
stuck on the first slide for a while.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just
Got it.
the important information is going to be on this slide here, just about that there's still funds remaining and that the applications are going to open September 1st through the 30th, and then just a little bit more description about needs and desires. Tends to be more kind of notes to remind me about what to talk about, but I've also sent the presentation to Keith and Lou, and so if you're able to share that with your members, that would be great. But yeah, again, thank you for that, for letting me know. Is it changing now, or is it on the eligibility criteria screen?
It's on the eligibility criteria screen. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'll ask again at the end of this slide.
Okay.
So criteria for being eligible for the business license hearing fund. For liquor or cabaret applicants, they can meet one qualification on the left there, and it's receiving a loan or a grant from one of these programs. Colorado, these are state level programs, Colorado Revolving Loan Fund, or there's the Denver Micro Lending Program, Colorado Enterprise Development Services, the Restaurant Up Program, Energize Colorado, or another similar program that's intended for small or disadvantaged businesses. Or you can qualify by meeting two of the criteria on the right, which is you're a sole proprietor or applying as a married couple. It's your first application for a liquor or cabaret license in Denver. You're applying for a hotel and restaurant, lodging, or entertainment license. All of the owners live in Denver at the time of the application. They've received a grant or tax credit from the Office of Economic Development and International Trade, I believe that is. Or they're certified woman-owned, Black-owned, LGBT business enterprise, or minority business enterprise. So again, two of those criteria, or one on the left. For marijuana, the criteria, oh, sorry, can you see the next screen? Is it on the marijuana criteria?
I don't think, no, it's still on liquor or cabaret.
Oh, man, okay.
Alex, you might also want to make it a little bit bigger if you can.
Bigger, interesting, okay. So
If
my
you
screen
just-
It's actually showing it to us in
Now
your
I see it.
PowerPoint
Oh,
mode. It's not showing
I
it
see
to us
what's
in your
happening.
slideshow mode.
Gotcha. Okay, let me I will pivot here and use this screen. Okay, so showing, can you see my mouse moving around in the eligibility criteria for
Yep.
marijuana? Okay,
Yep.
I'll use this screen.
Awesome.
Thank you for that. Apologies. All over the place place tonight. So for marijuana, it's got to be a social equity applicant, and that's sort of a state level program. Those are the requirements are in state law. And you can see the criteria there for being a social equity applicant. It's basically meant to sort of make up for the war on drugs that, now something is legal, whereas it used to be, illegal. And so I'm trying to create some equity around folks that may have been harmed by the war on drugs, specifically marijuana, which is now legal and, benefiting the state and residents in different ways. And so there's a state program for folks that are social equity applicants to get that designation. If they are designated social equity applicants and they've received a marijuana license in Denver, or they're applying for one, apologies, then they're eligible for the business license hearing fund. And then now the part that you guys are most interested in, that's the eligibility criteria for RNOs and residents. So for RNOs, the criteria is that that's in one of these qualifying neighborhoods. So it's the 18 nest neighborhoods. Those are the most underserved, disadvantaged neighborhoods in the city. And they're identified based on an index that another department applies to different neighborhoods using different data points. And so this is actually the top 25 most underserved neighborhoods. So it's the 18 nest neighborhoods plus 7 more. And if your RNO, if your boundary overlaps with one of these qualifying neighborhoods, the other criteria is obviously that your RNO boundaries overlap with the designated area around the business. And so the director of excise and licenses will designate an area that's around the business to show which residents are likely to be most impacted by the new use or the new business. Generally, it's just the RNO, but so your boundaries have to overlap with that designated area. So obviously, if it's a bar or restaurant, some sort of business that's several miles, many miles away, and it's not really in your neighborhood, that's a different situation. But if you're in the designated area and you're in one of these qualifying neighborhoods, then you are eligible for the business license hearing fund to apply as an RNO. You can also apply as individual residents. And so you need at least 3 residents to come together, and it's the same criteria. You got to live in one of these qualifying neighborhoods and live in the designated area around the business. And then the next slide here is about the amount. So you can receive your can be awarded up to $10,000 for qualifying legal expenses. So qualifying legal expenses are legal services. That's a kind of a misprint there about attorney's fees. Is really any kind of legal service that's been provided that you can provide an invoice for that shows that you've engaged legal service provider of some kind, and it's for a service that's related to you participating in the hearing. So if you had an attorney, draft a G&A or appear at the hearing, or provide some other service related to the hearing, you can get reimbursed for those. If you meet the criteria and you apply within the window and there's still funds left, you can get those reimbursed. So really, that's the point of the program, is that we obviously don't control legal service providers. It's clearly a need that some participants have, and so we wanted to make that a little bit more equitable and provide some resources for folks, particularly RNOs that might not be able to afford those on their own, and so to get some reimbursement so it doesn't drain your funds for other purposes. The process for applying is just a simple online form. It's a couple pages, but it's usually information that you can pull relatively easily. Your RNO's name, the business that's being the license that's being applied for, the date of the hearing, information like that. And then if we need additional information, we will follow up with you. So that's generally if you have been awarded or found to be eligible for the fund, we might request itemized receipts or invoices, things like that, or we will. And then the funds are awarded on a first come, first served basis. So we encourage those interested to apply early on in the during the application window. Again, that's going to be September 1 through September 30th. And yeah, apply early to make sure that you get in there. Moving forward, looking at next year, so we do intend to fund the program again in 2025. It is funded through the general fund, so it's a request that we make, with our budget request for the department. But obviously, budget challenges that may come up in the near future may require us to change those initial plans. But right now, the plan is to extend the program again next year, as we did from last year. Last slide here is links to the Business License Hearing Fund webpage. So that includes more details in case you missed something here tonight about eligibility or timelines, other things like that. There's more information during the application period, so some of that information gets taken down between application rounds, but it will be back up when we're gearing up for the round in September. There's also a link here to our public hearings webpage, so you can get information about the hearing schedules, about frequently asked questions, the policies and procedures, and that guide that I mentioned, the user-friendly guide. And then last is my email here. If you have any questions about the Business License Hearing Fund, feel free to email me and let me know. I'm happy to respond to any questions, jump on a call, return an email, whatever it might be. And then real quick, before we jump into questions, Lou had asked me to talk a little bit about mediation services. And so the city does provide mediation services. We do have a third-party provider for those. In order to use those mediation services for mediation with a business, we ask that you email Excise and Licenses, and we're specifically going to have you email Dominic Viana. I've sent this information in writing to Keith and Lou, and so hopefully they'll be able to share that. Actually, you know what? I'll put it in the chat when I'm done here. But so email this specific person, our operations director. And first of all, both parties have to agree to it beforehand, because we can't force a business to engage in the mediation process. So make sure that you've talked to them about it ahead of time. It's not going to be a surprise for them. Email Dominic and CC the other party for full transparency, so everybody knows what's going on, and then just include a short description of the issue or challenge. So it could be like, short-term rental, issues with trash and noise from a short-term rental, issues with noise from a bar or restaurant, just kind of generally what the issue is. Doesn't not too long, just something so that the mediator will know what to expect. And with that, I will stop sharing and put some of this information in the chat.
I just put it in the chat, so you don't have to do that, so everyone has it right there.
And I'll jump back on camera here. Hopefully my bandwidth on my internet here doesn't cut me off, but happy to answer any questions that y'all have. Looks like we've some activity in the chat.
Yeah, I think we probably got time for a couple of questions, Alex.
Okay.
Maybe
Sure.
if I know you're. We definitely appreciate you stopping by tonight. If you're able to hang out until the end of the next presentation, we could do some more. But I do want to just throw one out here that I believe Eileen asked a while back, which was about kind of the process and I think you covered this a little bit in terms of, what if a neighborhood does have a good neighborhood agreement and the business seems to not be following through with that, and they aren't able to get these kind of community this public hearing fund. What are kind of the options moving forward? And Eileen, feel free to expand on that if you need to.
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. I'll jump in here and note that, so as Lou mentioned earlier, good neighbor agreements are generally private agreements between the R&O and the business. And so if that's the situation, it's really the R&O that needs to enforce that through the civil action, essentially. If you're able to get the G&A conditions placed on the face of the license, then it is an actual condition of that license. And the other benefit of that is if the license is transferred, is sold to somebody else, those conditions will run with the license. As Lou had mentioned earlier, the way that some agreements run with the land, these conditions would run with the license if they're placed on the face of the license. And the opportunity to do that is really your best opportunities at the hearing to make the case for those. The hearing officer will will provide a recommended decision, and then the director of excise and licenses will make the ultimate decision about issuing that license and under what conditions. And so if you make a good showing at the hearing, then that provides an opportunity for the director to take those things into consideration and potentially place those conditions on the license. If there are conditions on the license and the licensee is violating those, please make us aware of those. Enforcement is complicated and challenging, and we have got so many businesses and so many different issues to handle, and so it can. The first step is making us aware that there's a problem, that there are conditions on the license and they're violating those conditions, and then we can go from there. I'll let Lou jump in here. Looks like she's got her hand up.
Well, I was going to ask you actually to just maybe do a clarifying point on that, which is, one, can let's just say there's private agreement. Some of those things I just know from experience that you're not going to get on the face of the license, but they're still enforceable. One, can the hearing fund be used for enforcement of the private agreements on those GNAs? And two, and you may not know that yet because I know it's a very young program. And two, if not, is that something that the mediation services could be tapped to assist the RNO with?
That's an interesting question. The first part is it has to be reimbursement for something directly related to the actual hearing. And so you participated in a hearing, you engaged legal services, you're eligible to be reimbursed for those charges directly related to your engagement with the hearing, the actual hearing process. And so no, that fund would not be you wouldn't be able to tap into that for enforcement. The mediation services, that might be a good opportunity. Actually, that might be a great first step because it's no cost to the RNO. It's not a capacity issue for the department or anything like that because it's a third party. And so that actually might be a really good use for those types of services, is to say, hey, we have this agreement. We'd like to sit down with you, voluntarily and walk through some of the issues that we've been having with this agreement that we had. So I think that's a potentially great use of that mediation service. So thank you for that question, Lou.
So I guess I just have a quick question, which is, this is a fund that's been used for a couple of years now. Is that correct? Or I know it's relatively new.
Yeah, so it started last year was the first year, and so this is the second year of the fund. And so yeah, it's very new. We're still learning.
Have you been able to give out all the funds available last year? And it sounds like this year you haven't yet been able to give out all the funds.
Yeah, last year I'm not sure. This is the first year that I've been assigned to it, so I'm not sure about last year. I think there might have been a little bit left over, but this year, we've got 150,000 to award, and at most we would issue about 66,000 from that first round, and so there's quite a bit left for round two. So that's one of the reasons we really appreciate you inviting us to share this information, to get the word out, particularly to those underserved neighborhoods.
Yeah, and that's great. And I mean, I support, I think everybody does, the equity focus of this. I think that, like more of a long-term kind of just comment is that I don't, if there could be a subset of these funds that are not necessarily, whether it's 20% or something at the end, if you have extra and you notice that over the number of years of this fund working, I don't know a lot of RNOs that have $10,000 that they can apply to legal fees, whether they're in a Nest neighborhood or in a Nest adjacent neighborhood or not. And I just think that, the more kind of conversations moving forward about, the effect, whether the funds are meeting the needs of the target audience, that kind of stuff, can always be helpful. And, we'd welcome to have you back and have that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I don't know if there's one more question, and then we'll move on from there.
Sorry, Keith, just to that point, we always, I forgot to mention, we always welcome input, right? So whether that's through INC, through RNO, through individuals, email me, email licenses@denvergov.org, call 311. There's lots of different ways to provide input. And so we're always listening for ways of improving our programs and our policies. And so, I wrote down here, set aside for Nest Neighborhoods and your comment about the $10,000 for RNOs. So thank you for that. Appreciate any and all input.
Yeah. Maybe one more question for Alex right now. If there's any. Well, Alex, thanks so much. If you can stick around, that would be great. If not, we totally understand. And we appreciate you coming here, especially on an evening, and staying this late up. So to hang out and
you guys do such fantastic work. You make my job easier. So happy to come and listen and learn as well. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Lucas.
Yeah, thanks to both Alex and Lou for 2 really good presentations earlier. I want to introduce someone I've had the privilege of working alongside and for, Mary Coddington. She works for Urban Ventures as well as a co-principal at Capella Consulting, both of whom are socially oriented consultants and developers. And she'll talk about the coalition building aspect of CBAs. Go for it, man. I believe you have screen sharing privileges.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lucas. It is nice to be with you all tonight. It is also nice to see some familiar faces. Hi, LaMone. Hi, Kevin. I got to work with LaMone and Kevin on the Park Hill Golf Course CBA, so it's really nice to see their faces. In addition to working at Capella Consulting, where I focus mostly on affordable housing, I know Inc. Most closely because I sit on the Denver Planning Board. So thank you guys for the letters that come through and from all of your respective RNOs as well. It's nice to put some faces to names. But I've also had the privilege of facilitating the Park Hill Golf Course Community Benefits Agreement, and I'm currently working on the Ball Arena Community Benefits Agreement. And so just wanted to talk a little bit about coalition building and some of the other aspects that we've come across. So, all right. I'm really glad that I jumped on early and got to hear some of Lou's presentation because we're going to zip through these first slides really quickly. But just based on, this is just a visualization I use to contrast a little bit of what Lou was talking through. The agreements that run between the city and the developer are really the large development review, the development agreement, and the rezoning. And the agreement between the community and the city is the community planning process. So all of the neighborhood planning initiatives, Blueprint Denver, and then a relatively new tool in Denver is our community benefits agreement, which is the negotiation directly between the developer and the community. So we can just zip through those descriptions really quickly. Thanks for teeing it up so well. So what I want to get into is a series of questions that have come up that on the surface seem kind of easy, but are not. The first is, who is the community? And that can be a really fraught question sometimes. I see LaMone's head nodding already. The only prerequisite for being part of a community benefits agreement on the community side is that there is something that will move you to yes, potentially. If your position is absolutely no development, the developer's not going to want you on the community benefits agreement negotiation piece. And so it's really important as you're thinking about the coalition that you're forming. It certainly doesn't have to be yes out of the gate, and there can be plenty of conditions and things that you want to see out of the development before you get there. But if you know that your position from the get is a no, you're not going to find success if success for you is defined by securing these benefits for the community. Ultimately, the developer gets to decide which group or groups they want to work with. It is discretionary up to them. That kind of gets back to the first point of needing to be willing to get to yes. It's a choice. And that's one of the challenges this has actually come up really recently as the city has gotten more excited about community benefits agreements and has sort of expressed to the development community working on these large projects that they expect to see them. It's tough because if you think back to that triangle that I was showing at the beginning, the city is not really supposed to be very involved in the community benefits agreement. There are spaces for those conversations to happen, but the relationship on the community benefits agreement is pretty direct between the developer and the community. The other thing that is a lesson learned from myself is be prepared to defend who is or is not a part of the community benefits agreement. And I encourage LaMone or Kevin, if interested, to speak up here. But one of the experiences that we had on the Park Hill Golf Course was really challenging because Northeast Park Hill is a historically and presently Black community that has been disenfranchised and has not had a voice in the economic development of the community. And it was really important that that Black voice was centered in the conversation. Because of that, we did not do an effective job of bringing in the Latin American Hispanic voices from the neighborhoods in the Northwest, from GES. As a facilitator, I can see both sides of that argument, but it was really tough to stand up in front of City Council and explain why we didn't engage the Elyria Swansea neighborhoods any more than what we had. LaMone, I saw you come off mute and go back on. Did you want to jump in or no?
Well, that part is true, that the primary community was Northeast Park Hill. And I guess City Council wants to know about a broader base, and that's where the GES community comes in because they too are affected by disinvestment. But this was really about Northeast Park Hill. So you do have to be conscious of your neighbors and who might weigh in. And then, like Mary said, you had to be prepared to defend who's primary and who's secondary.
Yeah, and it's challenging to answer those questions sometimes and figure out how to go about it in the right way. The right way isn't always clear. What I would suggest, and what we have tried to do on the ballerina process, is continue the outreach throughout the process. And that's a balancing act as well. We're going to talk about the volunteer hours that go into CBAs in a minute, and it's a lot of time, and you tend to end up with a core constituency. You guys are all representing RNOs here, which means you're in at least 2 meetings a month, probably more if you're on committees. So you guys know about volunteer hours, but it is really challenging and sort of self-selecting the volunteer hours that are required to be part of this work. And so again, another balance point is figuring out how to be inclusive and continue having the process being open, and also respect the time and energy that people have put in for months and months and months, if not years, into the work. The next piece is, what are we negotiating? And Lou, I think you did a really great job talking through this, but I did want to bring in some of the distinction. Because the development agreement is a negotiated agreement between the city and the developer, just because there are items that go in the development agreement doesn't mean that they shouldn't also go in the CBA. You can have duplication there. It is important to make sure that they don't contradict, but basically by having them duplicated in 2 different places, you just have 2 different sets of eyes on the work. So the city is responsible for enforcement. It also gives the community a pathway to monitor these things and have some enforcement, although it's admittedly more difficult to enforce a CBA. You can also have things that can't go into a DA. I don't know how many of you have worked closely with city attorneys, but they have a long list of things that they do not want the city to touch or get involved in any way. And so the CBA is a really great place to start to codify those commitments that you're asking for and that the developer is willing to do, that the city doesn't want to be responsible for monitoring or enforcing. So those could be things like one of the things that we're working on now is an affirmative marketing plan for the affordable housing that's included in Ball Arena, where there will be a proactive marketing to descendants of displaced Agrarians who used to live in the Agrarian neighborhood before it was a campus, and to Native American and American Indian people who also have such a deep history, especially at the confluence of those rivers. The city does not want to be in the business of enforcing that piece because of concerns around fair housing. The other point that I would put in here in terms of what are we negotiating is to be really wary of anything that can be perceived as the community being bought off. So if there's anyone on the coalition that runs a business and they think it would be a really great idea to have their business named as the proprietor of something that would come from the development, that's where it gets into really tricky territory. And you can erode trust with the broader community when you have elements like that in there. You know, they'll say, oh, they just sold us up the river so that they could get a nice contract for the work that they were doing. They didn't actually care about the community. Whether or not that's rooted in truth, it's just really important to be cognizant about that perception. And then how long does it take? This is a really tricky question because there are sort of three phases to the CBA process. The first is creating internal priorities, which can take 1 to 5 years or more. LaMone and Kevin were working on the Park Hill Golf Course project long before I came on board as a facilitator. And you really have to, do a little bit of a dance to make sure that everyone is getting the thing that they care most about addressed and that it's equally weighted. Right now, the proposed list of community priorities for Ball Arena is 11 pages long. That is a lot of asks. And where it gets really tricky is when the asks have financial commitments attached to them, and right-sizing those in relationship to each other, figuring out what can be chipped away and how much. So the internal priorities takes a long time, and then they continue to adjust as you're doing continual outreach, because there are people that you didn't know you should talk to at the beginning of the process that are going to have their own issues that are important to them. The actual negotiations with the developer are typically the shortest part of the process. They can take, 6 or 7 months. They can take a little over a year. With both the Park Hill Golf Course and the Ball Arena project, we are meeting with the developer every week, just about. And so it is a lot of communication, a lot of level setting, a lot of communication from the developer of what their plans are, and them trying to convince you that their plans are exactly what you wanted. And so that's a little bit of a long road. But then the biggest piece is compliance and figuring out, either from the folks who are on the CBA negotiating committee or folks that can step into position afterwards, who's going to keep the eye on it to make sure that those commitments are fulfilled. And that's the hardest part, because especially for these large projects, they have build-out horizons that are longer than 20 years. So that is a group of nonprofits that are going to have the longevity to be around that long. Obviously, each individual's commitment doesn't have to be for the full 20 years, but the only way to enforce a CBA is to bring mediation or legal action. It's a proactive approach by the community if they're seeing that the commitments aren't being made. And so it's really important to have a group, ideally of multiple organizations in case some fade out over time, to monitor that the work is being done. And then how much does it cost? On average, between the whole two that I've worked on, the facilitation has been over 400 hours of my and my team's time, which is over $75,000. You need legal support so that you can vet the drafts that are coming to you from the developer's team of attorneys, which can run, upwards of $100,000 or more. And like I mentioned earlier, that volunteer time is between 500 and 1,000 hours of not just the negotiation sessions that are happening weekly with the developers, also the internal meetings that are happening just with the committee. So that's 2 meetings a week right there, not to mention the report outs to everybody's respective RNOs and community organizations, not to mention the research that goes into it to try to get enough information to have an informed conversation with the developer. You know, it is just an incredible commitment from volunteers in the community to get this done. So I've given you a lot of information about how hard it is, but I just kind of wanted to build on the successes that Lou was sharing in her presentation. One of which comes from Nashville with the new Major League Soccer stadium that was coming in there. This was the first community benefits agreement in Tennessee. And a group actually formed Stand Up Nashville that went on to work on other organizing activities, but this was their owneth. And they got so much stuff out of this agreement. They got commitments for a certain percentage of affordable housing to be built. And that's in a very different context than we have in Denver. In Denver, we have a floor because of our inclusionary housing ordinance, expanding housing affordability. They did not have that in Nashville. A commitment to family size housing, a wage floor for people working in the stadium, a lot of community services and amenities, including a childcare facility, a lot of workforce development, and then a community advisory committee for that oversight and monitoring of the CBA. Another one was Facebook when they were expanding their campus in Silicon Valley. And this was Envision, Transform, Build in East Palo Alto, which was comprised of union organizers, churches, neighborhood leaders. And they got a really large affordable housing fund that was over $18 million. It was Facebook. So it's certainly larger than what we have seen here. They also got a tenant assistance fund so that there would be an opportunity for legal assistance to tenants facing evictions, a home rehab fund, as well as more jobs and workforce development. And then this example, Dearborn Street out of Seattle, is very reminiscent of the Park Hill Golf Course, where they got so many wonderful things and really set a lot of precedents in their CBA, including in all of these categories of affordable housing and amenities and workforce development. Unfortunately, the year of this was 2008, and the development didn't go through because of market reasons. And so despite having this signed CBA, it was not realized, which is very familiar to those of us who worked on the Park Hill Golf Course, which obviously did not go through for other reasons. So I think that there are a lot of positive things that can come out of this work, but it is without a doubt hard work. And going back to my earlier point of the city's enthusiasm for this tool, I think it is 100% appropriate on these large scale developments. But I want to caution, you know, as we're looking at neighborhood voice and those kinds of elements in more moderate scaled projects, I just think that the intensity required both in cost and in time is too much unless you're looking at some seriously transformative projects. I think there are other tools that can be used. I know that the folks at DITO are looking at how to strengthen development agreements to include more of these community serving priorities and workforce development and childcare and some of those pieces within the city's agreement, which is beneficial. Personally, I think while a lot of these things are really good, there's an argument to be made that in a similar structure to what was proposed in Park Hill Golf Course with the property tax relief for people living within a certain radius of the site, potentially it's a UBI, a universal basic income type payment to people who income qualify, who would be most affected by these catalytic developments, which I think is a way to have the same impact and stabilizing force that isn't so draining on the community. So I'm really excited to see how these conversations evolve in our city. And I thank you for the opportunity to come talk to you guys tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Mary. Lucas, I don't know if you just want to facilitate questions, or I can as well.
I can do it.
Great.
Sounds good. Anybody got anything? I know that was a lot of info.
I think LaMone had a good question in the chat from earlier. LaMone, can you bring that up?
So when we get notice of developments from CPD, they include a RNO position statement template as part of the package. And I was wondering how effective are those RNO position statements, because it's asking for a vote, it's asking how many people attended. And I'm just wondering how effective a tool that is, at least to get the RNO's position known prior to these CBA, city council hearings, etc.
I think that they're really impactful. I know just from the last couple of years on planning board, seeing applicants really get grilled on what their community engagement and what their engagement was with the RNOs and neighbors has been, if we're seeing a preponderance of letters in opposition, because, you know, as we all know, there are cases that come forward where people are not engaging and having conversations with the community. I think it has the potential to be even more impactful in the future. The planning department is going through a process right now for advancing equity and rezoning. I imagine some folks on the call may have been involved in that process, but looking at how we can change our criteria on how we view cases to elevate voices that have historically not been heard in the development process, and have a more equitable approach around that.
And I have another question for you too about the ball arena. With the Park Hill Golf Course, what should have been a neighborhood issue wound up going onto the ballot because of some initiatives. I don't feel that the community was taken seriously, and I felt like the anti-developer hatred drove that vote. So with the ball arena, will they be impacted by any easements or any issues that's going to require their development to go on the ballot for approval by voters?
They don't have anything like the conservation easement, so there won't be necessarily be a voter approval. I know, similar to the golf course, there are several components of the hearing that's going to be heard by city council, including metropolitan districts that they're proposing for the site to fund the infrastructure, the rezoning application, the development agreement, vacating a old view plane based on where the old city hall was in the city, and then also an extension of the arena trust, which commit the two sports teams that Kroenke Sports Entertainment own, commits them to staying in Denver for a longer term. So like we saw in the Park Hill Golf Course case, City Council will have a series of votes when it comes before them in order to pass the project through. But there's nothing on the site that would elevate it to a citywide vote, like the conservation easement.
Okay. And so how can communities prepare themselves for the hearings and public comment in front of City Council?
Yeah, I mean, I think really just showing up, it's always helpful if you support the work that you know, whether you're in proximity to it or not, if you understand the arguments that are being made and advocated and support those, to reiterate those, the points that are being advocated for by the Community Benefits Committee, amplifying those same points and showing that they're held by a broad range of constituents is the most impactful thing for city councilors.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Lou's got her hand raised.
Yeah, so I just looking at the chat, I just wanted to remind everyone here that that is why it was so important to talk about a spectrum, that what Mary is talking about, very important for huge city impactful developments, but most of the time your RNO is not going to be dealing with those large ones. As Mary pointed out in the chat, you have a lot of foundations that are willing to step up and help with some of those. And those, I mean, if you ask me, some of that, those fees are probably light. You can get a lot higher than that working on legal fees with some of these firms who, start at $700 an hour. So you're really looking at that way far end of the spectrum when you're talking about community benefit agreements of this size. But again, this is one, and I pointed it out before in the August 23, there are times when it is okay for the RNO to ask the developer to pay the fees of the RNO to get to an agreement. So RNOs should not shy away really from engaging and remembering that you're probably not going to be doing the work as an RNO on Ball Arena, right? I mean, you might be a cog in the wheel, but you're not going to have to drive the bus alone. So focusing on those more moderate sized and what you can do and what you can ask for. I don't want anybody to get completely, frustrated that these things cost a lot to do, because our job is to make these resources available to you so that you can identify the most important things and then to be a resource for you, because it's the smaller projects that most RNOs are going to have to handle by themselves. And there are ways to deal with that. So I just wanted to put that out there because I saw the chat where people are going, oh my God, $75,000 for a consultant. Yeah, you're going to have those on the big developments, but probably not on the one going in down the street from your house. So.
Keith?
I do, I think we do need to kind of wrap this up. So if there's somebody else with a question, I'm happy to hold off on mine.
In the chat we have, if the developer doesn't, or if the developer pays attorney fees, doesn't the attorney owe loyalty to the developer?
No, that's not what I said, but what I said was have the developer agree to pay the attorney's fees to benefit the RNO. So if it's a large enough developer and the RNO is at the table saying, gosh, we're a little over our head, we'd like you, developer, to pay $10,000 toward our attorney's fees. That's a fair thing to ask for. I mean, just think of anybody in your life who's gone through a divorce and the rich spouse has to pay the attorney for the other spouse. It's not that different. It's just a negotiation. And in many of the situations, that's a fair thing. So it's not that the attorney who's representing the developer is going to represent the RNO. It's that the developer is going to pay the RNO's attorney to represent the RNO.
So.
Let's do Gertie, and then I'll ask her a quick question.
Yeah, what I'm hoping that we can develop in this in the samples that are available for RNOs to follow is different ways of approaching this whole process, because I think there are times when developers are willing to put funds in escrow to pay for the RNO's attorney's fees. We've had one who volunteered to do it, and I am just kind of shocked because we also dealt with one who absolutely would not agree to pay any of the attorney's fees. So it'll be, I mean, I think this whole thing that Lou is that's being developed by INC as a resource for RNOs is a growing and developing process, and I think we need to recognize there are alternative ways of doing these things.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that really quickly. One of the things that was in the Park Hill Golf Course CBA was $50,000 to help seed the implementation committee, that 20+ year committee that would have to monitor it for ever. And it was a really, really small percentage of what that cost would be over time. We just needed some money to get started, and we're going to apply for other foundation funding. However, even that, because that particular deal was so contentious, it was said, oh, that's just a payoff so that these people would support it. And so I think the more that we can normalize the developer covering some of those costs, the more you'll be able to exercise it, and the less risk of it being kind of thrown back in your face that like, this is just a payoff is going to be out there.
Sounds good. Keith?
Great, thanks. And I think, and you can answer this shortly because I think it's kind of a maybe a fluid question, but is there, you know, kind of a definition of what counts as a affected neighborhood by a development project, you know, and if you could maybe use the ball arena in terms of, you know, what neighborhoods are you communicating with, and what neighborhoods aren't you? I mean, I'm in Sloan's Lake, and I don't know that while we are certainly going to be affected by the development of that arena, we haven't been really approached to be part of any kind of a CBA that I know of. But like with Sun Valley, is that close, or, you know, if you can kind of differentiate that?
We're working with Sun Valley, LaMone Lincoln Park, and who am I leaving out? Lodo. We did try to do broader outreach, and this is where that coalition building gets really, really tricky. As a consultant who lives in a different part of the city, I get a name to reach out to, or, you know, there's a website that says this is the contact for the West Colfax neighborhood, or, you know, wherever it is. And it might be that person is not the most active or responsive, but that's the name I got. This actually happened when I was trying to get in touch with the displaced Agrarians. I ended up being connected with somebody at the Auraria Higher Education campus, and I thought that was the representative for the displaced Agrarians. Very much not the representative for the displaced. So it's just like, from that perspective, as you're trying to pull together the right coalition, a lot of it is luck, and a lot of it is bandwidth of, you know, who can commit to 11 months of bi-weekly meetings.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks for that. And then maybe Inc. can help play a role in, you know, making some of those connections and moving forward. Mary, thank you so much for coming and speaking tonight. Lou, thank you for your presentation. I am going to pull up my screen real quick. We're going to try to go quickly through just a few announcements for the folks that are still here. Let me see here. Great. And I wanted to get to these because these are kind of coming up. And the biggest thing that can everybody see my screen? The announcements, is that what's up? Hey, a thumbs up from anybody? You see announcements?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thanks. So the biggest thing here is that that Radian, who we've been working with, is, you know, they're an urban planning firm that has been working specifically with equity issues in neighborhood organizing and neighborhood groups. And they have a dinner series that's coming up, excuse me, that's starting. They're doing 3 different dinners. They did do an RNO equity summit in May. That was, you know, I think there was about 20 different folks there. That was really good. And they are starting a dinner series, basically to talk about equity and RNOs and trying to work on equity issues. They're grant supported. And, you know, we had a meeting with the board on Monday night, and I think we're really supportive of this effort, you know, from our point of view, and we're trying to help where we can. So there's a 15-person cap on these dinners. And the first one is going to be August 8th. And each dinner, they're asking for a suggested donation of $25. So I spoke with them extensively today to try to kind of figure out the logistics of this. So the board was very supportive of this idea, which I'm really excited about. Inc. is going to cover that cost for up to 7 INC members to go to these dinners throughout the fall. So if you're interested, there is a promo code that Radian put together, which is INC member. I'll put this link in the chat box, and we'll also be sending this out to our email list. But if you're interested in going to these and interested in learning more about equity and RNOs and trying to figure out how, RNOs can be more equitable, especially, in the context of your own RNO or kind of in a broader context, these are great conversations that Radian is trying to kind of push forward. And INC is really trying to help with that. And we thought that covering the cost of the dinner was a great way that we could support that for the fall. So there's going to be 3 dinners, like I said. One's coming up in August. The other one's going to be in October on the 10th, and then on the 5th of December. And so we'll keep promoting this throughout the fall. Radian is also doing RNO equity consulting, and they're almost full, actually. They sent this email out. If you're an RNO, you probably got this email already. But they are doing equity consulting for free for RNOs. And I think they only have 1 spot left. And I asked them today, and I think they've had 6 or 7 RNOs that have already contacted them. And most of those RNOs, I believe, are INC members, which is great. I think that's fantastic. So if you're interested, Aaliyah at radianinc.org is the email address to ask about that. They've also got an equity toolkit that we're going to keep sharing, and we're hoping that they'll come and speak at one of our events in the fall again too. Let's see here. Let me move real quickly through here. LaMone. Oh, so September 14th is going to be our next community meeting. We're not going to have a community meeting in August, so we're going to give everybody a break. Enjoy August and the rest of your summer. September 14th, we're working on doing a Denver elections forum. We don't have a venue secured yet, but we're working closely on that. Lou's working hard with a spot in Cherry Creek, which I think is great. LaMone, do you want to talk real quick about the food justice program in October?
Yeah, so we're doing the program in Northeast Park Hill at the Zion Senior Center. And we're bringing in several speakers who could talk about different programs and issues regarding food justice and sustainability in communities that do not have access to grocery stores or fresh food. So we're planning to do that at the Zion Senior Center, where they also have their own community garden. And hopefully, I believe they'll be harvesting around that time. So I will keep you posted as to what we're going to be doing for sure.
Great, thanks so much, LaMone. Let's see, moving on, I think opportunities to get involved. I've kind of grouped these together, but we have a lot of different opportunities to get involved with INC. We're always looking for folks that are interested in leadership positions, but if we definitely have a need for folks that want to be involved in some of the other things that we do over the year. So I've kind of generally grouped these as an outreach and events team. The biggest thing that's coming up is we're doing our annual awards neighborhood celebration in November this year, on November 13th, I believe. It's going to be fantastic. We're really excited. We're going to be at the Town Hall Collaborative on Santa Fe. It's an all-female owned event venue that's really a fantastic space. Several of our board members have used it before, so we're really excited about that. We're looking for folks that are interested in being involved in some of the logistics of the evening, but then also we have a committee that's going to put together neighborhood awards that we give out every year, and we're really looking for anybody that's interested in being involved with that. Then That might be it, actually. Greg, are you still on? Do you want to talk about the RNO 101 project at all?
So this has been mentioned throughout the evening by both LaMone and Lou that we're developing a toolkit that we're going to post online about how to be an effective RNO, going from how to form an RNO to maintaining your RNO, growing your RNO, and then how to interact effectively with the city. So it's a lot of work. We have a lot of irons in the fire. So if you want to help, that would be great.
Great. Thanks so much, Greg. I think that's it. Is there anybody else that had any comments? I'm looking through the chat here, kind of trying to, and I don't necessarily see anything that's jumping out at me. But I want to make sure that if there's anybody has anything they want to bring up. All right. Well, maybe there's a new message in there. Yeah, and Lou's just saying that all of the information on GNAs and benefit agreements are going to be in the handbook too, and we're going to get that up on the website. So, well, great. Well, thank you all for joining us on this summer Thursday night in July. Have a wonderful rest of your July and August, and we will reconvene in September, hopefully with a really good discussion or forum on some of the many ballot issues that are going to be on the slate this fall in November. So with that, if there isn't any other questions, we'll wrap up for the night.
Thank you all very much.
And thank you again to Mary and Lou and Lucas for helping to put a great program together, and Alex, who had to pop off. This was definitely really informative, and I think we'll get it up on the website and it'll be a great resource moving forward.